Howdy, y'all. It's Cody from Keepers of Nerdom, and I thought today we should get back to the roots of some of my stuff that I love talking about, and that's our wonderful Necrons. And today will be our Immortals. And the big question as well is Gauss Immortals or Tesla? Let's run through kind of the basic stats and then have a conversation of what's the use of different pieces here. And then we'll do some scrolling through a few things that connect to it. So first off, we have for 5 models at 70, 10 is 140. So pretty expensive unit of these things. They have a 5-inch movement with 5 toughness, 3 up save with 1 wound apiece. That's what's crazy. It still boggles my brain that we still just have 1 wound models there. 7 plus leadership, which is not great, and 2 OC. So objective control of 2. Not bad, not good. Like Garon, cool, got it. Now, let's go through here. Reanimation protocols, everything has, so they get to heal or resurrect something, or, back and forth, back and forth. Implacable eradication, this is a very fascinating thing. Each time a model in this unit makes an attack, reroll a wound roll of 1. If the target of that attack is an enemy unit within range of an objective marker, you can reroll the wound roll instead. So you could have full wound rerolls on something you're firing at that's on an objective marker. Pretty crazy. And all models in this unit can each have their Gauss blaster replaced with 1 Tesla carbine, so it has to be all. So it's either Gauss or Immortal. There's not an in-between. You can't mix, and I think I either misplayed it in 9th edition or they allowed it. I don't remember. All right, so let's go through our weapons. Close combat weapon is 2 attacks, 3 up weapon skill, 4 strength, 0 IP, 1 damage. Nothing to write home about, but you could maybe squash a bug. Cool. All right, so Gauss Blaster, it does have lethal hits. Lethal hits, I love Waha PD, by the way. It's so amazing. Like this. Weapons with lethal hits, each time they make an attack with such a weapon, a critical hit of a 6 is what that is, automatically wounds the target. And then you could actually click in here and get more info. So you don't have to roll the wound roll. Now, what's funny is about the lethal hits, that kind of goes against their implacable eradication because they have a built-in wound reroll. However, what if you're firing into something that's very big, say a tank or something else that has a really high toughness? Well, you don't want to even try to roll the wound roll because you'd be rolling on 6s, and even re-rolling that, your odds are not going to be great of getting many of them. So this is actually a pretty powerful ability just to bypass the second part of the attack phase, because you roll to hit and then you roll to wound, and so you have to roll twice to actually make the hit happen. And so this bypasses that. Now, the Tesla carbine, we need to do our stats. Range is 24 inches on both, and the Tesla carbine used to be 18 and now it's 24. So that's a big change because an extra 6 inches to this weapon range is pretty massive. And it's interesting where we were getting shrinking auras and stuff that all of a sudden they just went, nah, just 24-inch range, which makes Tesla way more interesting because the 18-inch range was very limited versus 24 gives you a lot more to play around with as far as having things in range for firing. Both do have 2 attacks, 3 up weapon skills, 5 strength. The difference here is -1 AP, but if they have cover, that -1 AP doesn't exist. That's what's crazy there, and 1 damage each. So really, these weapons aren't very different as far as what's going on here. It's the special abilities that make things really interesting. So the AP might come into play if you can get it just certain positions or other units helping you get rid of cover or something like that. There's very limited right now with the Necrons in that way. And if memory serves, it might be down to 1. I can't remember who it is, though. Triarch Stalker, maybe, but that might have been 9th edition. Anyway, so we have Assault, which is really interesting that they could advance and still fire with the weapon for the Tesla carbine. That's its first special ability. So it's interesting. Gauss Blaster has just lethal hits, but that bypasses an entire roll that they do get to wound reroll. So there's that's granted, right? And this thing, though, lets you advance and then fire. That's pretty crazy stuff. Now, sustained hits 2. What that means is every time you roll a critical hit, so the first roll you roll a 6, you get 2 extra hits built into that. That's a lot of shots coming out of these weapons. So for 10 models, you got 20 shots. Even 3 of those, right? There's an extra 6 shots, and all of a sudden, 26 potential hits. Now, not all of those are actually going to hit, but that's kind of an interesting thing to think about, that there are ways to get quite a few shots. They're not going to be very good shots because they have no AP, right? They're not going to go through anything. Now, there's a little bit of ways to work around that with such things as well. Let's just go through some examples of what works with the Immortals and what makes them interesting. We'll also look at team abilities. So let's go back up here and do our let's do Illumina Zaris first to see if he works with them. Okay, mechanical augmentation. While a friendly Necron's battle line unit is within 3 inches of this model, each time a model in that unit makes an attack, improve the AP by 1. And each time an attack targets that unit, worsen the AP by 1. So it actually, he protects them. He is 160 points, so he's expensive, but that's really, really cool. And that could make them way more survivable. And also, all of a sudden your Gauss weapons are -2 AP, and your Teslas now have an AP on them, which may not come into play because of the save from, the bonuses from cover, but kind of interesting stuff right there. So there's an option that would help them. The one that people have been using a whole lot of, let's do Overlord first. Overlord, we're not going to look at everything over here weapons-wise, but just the My Will Be Done. Once per battle round, one unit from your army with this ability can be targeted with a stratagem for 0 CP, even if you've already targeted a different unit with that stratagem in this phase. This was something that they were actually using on the Teslas, and it was in the Canoptic Court, because the Combat Court at first said, well, you're all now, because if you have a Cryptek in there, you become a Cryptek, so you count for our detachment ability. Let's look at that for just a second here. No, we don't want to talk about that one. There we go. So each time a model in a Cryptek or Canoptek unit from your army makes an attack, reroll a hit roll of 1. If such a unit is wholly within your army's power matrix, you can reroll a hit roll instead. So you could make them Crypteks, but they actually changed it from sorry. No, it wasn't this part. My bad. Just this interesting thing that each time a model in a Cryptek or Canoptek unit, so this actually still works. They still get full hit rerolls potentially if they're in the power matrix, and full wound rerolls if the target's on an objective. And then they actually had a stratagem that was really crazy because there it is right there. Sinister of Eradication. They changed it to the end of the phase. Weapons equipped by Cryptek or Canoptek models in your unit have the devastating wounds, and so that you could actually give the Tesla carbines, I say carbines, but just the Tesla weapons. It might be called Tesla carbines. I can't remember. Just you could give them devastating wounds, have full hit rerolls and wound rolls, and be fishing for those critical wounds. That's insane. Absolutely insane, because you could reroll the wound roll to try to get that 6. Now, the thing people were really taking wasn't just the 0 CP stratagem stuff, but the Overlord with the Translocation Shroud, because the Translocation Shroud made you guarantee advance 6 inches instead of having to roll for it. So you could get 1 through 6. Then this was just a guaranteed 6. You could take the Teslas and get to move 6. So 5 inches plus the 6. So you have 11 inches plus their range. So 35 inches of range with their weaponry because of how much they move, because the Teslas have assault. Pretty strong and pretty crazy. And that's why they changed that. So that way you couldn't get some crazy shenanigans out of Tesla Immortals. And the other reason this was working so well is Plasmancer. There we go. Yeah, here we go. Harbinger of Destruction. While this model is leading a unit, each time a model in that unit makes a ranged attack, a successful unmodified hit roll of 5 plus scores a critical hit. And here's where the game gets really hard. Which one do you go with for Immortals? Where do you go? Right, these are the main things that we could focus in on, because you could power them up with extra AP. You could have the Overlord with Translocation Shroud advancing them, and there used to be inside of the Canoptic Court a stratagem that you could use for 0 CP to give them all devastating wounds. And with the Teslas being able to advance and still be able to fire, you could do some crazy stuff. They changed that at least, but we still have this, and this works on both the Gauss and the Tesla. While this model is leading a unit, each time a model in that unit makes a ranged attack, successful unmodified hit roll of 5 plus scores a critical hit. So all of a sudden, and plus it has Living Lightning, so it's also just nice to have, because this leader can attach into with a Royal Warden or a Noble, so they can jump in as well and have more involved there. Okay, so we go back to the Immortals. Oh, it is Tesla Carbine. Good. So Gauss Blaster could hit on lethal hits 5 and 6s. That's a lot of hits that don't even have to roll for the wound roll that you could reroll anyway, but you wouldn't have to. Whereas the other side, with the Tesla, is where it gets really interesting. Because of the assault, they can take that Overlord Translocation Shroud and still fire after advancing. It's a lot of movement. All of a sudden, this 24-inch range isn't equal with each other because the Tesla actually can have 6 extra inches over the Gauss blaster. So it's actually a 30-inch range versus 24. Does that make sense? It's crazy to think about that. Now, granted, some of that, obviously, that's 6 inches of movement, so that puts them in range of other things. And they were initially, a very big glass cannon that they were going to take something out. But if you could take out with 140 points something that was 300 or 400, or at least get it down to where other stuff could finish that off, that was pretty impressive. And you could do it also for free for a little bit with the 0 CP stratagem stuff, and then use another squad of them without the free, 0 CP stratagem, and still pay the 2 CP for it, because it was a 2 CP. Yeah, 2 CP. You could still do it again. It's crazy stuff, right? So they took that away, which is good, but we still have the critical hit thing with the Plasmancer. Now, the Plasmancer really gets interesting with both sides of this, but I think in a way the Tesla Carbine, just because of the Translocation Shroud Overlord, they won't have AP. But okay, all right, let's just process this with me for a moment. So if you're in Awakened Dynasty, right, you get +1 to hit, so their ballistic skill would go up to 2 up to hit. So anything but a 1 will hit, and you can re-roll. Well, you can't re-roll hit rolls in the Awakened Dynasty, but that's pretty cool. The reason people are taking a Canoptic Court is you get to, if you're in your Power Matrix, re-roll your hit rolls. And if you're not, you get to at least re-roll your hit rolls of 1s if you're a Canoptic or Cryptek unit, right? And that's really crazy stuff with the Teslas because, and this would be hard for me to really do at times just because it just feels weird, is roll and take away every roll that isn't a 5 or a 6 and re-roll those, because you're fishing for those 5s and 6s as much as possible, because the statistics will say your sustained hits 2 is going to do quite a bit, and you're still going to hit with a second reroll with a 3-up ballistic skill, more than you're going to miss. So you're going to get even more sustained hits on top because you'll get some more 5s and 6s, and you'll still have 3s and 4s. You'll still have some more, you'll have some 1s and 2s, but kind of crazy. And what if you're firing at something that's already on an objective marker? You get to reroll the wound roll, or at the very least, you'd get to reroll wound rolls of 1 always with them. So all of a sudden, you have, should be, right, 20 shots with the Tesla Carbine, but the question really is, how many actual shots are you going to end up with when you're actually rolling? Now, if something has a 2-up save, not a lot's going to go through. But what if they have a 3-up or a 4-up save? You don't have any AP, but it doesn't really matter because you're going to be hitting them with so much firepower. If you're going up against Adeptus Custodes, that 2-up save is going to make it feel like, man, I just hit them with 35 plus shots of stuff and 2 went through, right, at most. That's what it's going to feel like, because it's probably going to be what happens. And don't be shocked by that, because a 2-up save is a 2-up save. 1s will show up, but not as much as you'd think. And then there's that one time where they'll roll and they'll be like, come here and look at what I just rolled. And you look over and it's like 6 1s in this big, massive group. You're like, ooh, buddy. But what an interesting thing it is. It's more about volume of shots than it is being necessarily as strong with the lethal hits and the AP -1. Which one's stronger? I think in a way the Tesla is actually stronger just because there's so many more shots going in, and the AP -1 anymore because we used to have AP2 on the Gauss blasters in 9th edition, and they reduced everything by like 1 AP almost. It has an impact. It has an effect in the game on what we have, what we do, what we use. Yikes. I think the best use for these guys is inside of one. Awakened Dynasty just works in general, just because a +1 to hit helps. It doesn't obviously get you a critical hit, but it keeps you from misses. That it's something. But I think the Canoptic Court is where these start to really shine, and I would take probably Teslas over the Gauss in that case. Although, what's interesting, and here's where it gets funny, which one's actually better against bigger toughness targets? The answer actually is the Gauss, because the lethal hits with a Plasmancer bypasses the wound roll. That's going to be really hard to hit, because not only are they going to make saving throws, but you have to make an attack roll and a wound roll, right? A hit roll and a wound roll, and then they're going to have their save. Whereas Tesla, that's going to be the issue that they're going to face, and the Gauss is just going to go, some of our shots just have to roll a hit roll. We don't have to go through the hard wound roll, because the wound roll is going to be tough, even if they're on an objective marker and you get to re-roll it. You're not going to be hitting very often. They're not meant to be anti-vehicle weapons necessarily, but lethal hits changes often weapons that shouldn't into things that will get a wound or two through into something that it normally wouldn't get through. It's just kind of impressive. But I think Canoptic Court is where this guy really shines with the Tesla. And I think I love the look of the Gauss blasters overall. But I think right now Tesla is the way to go because of the shenanigans that are being given. And they had to even just change an entire stratagem just because the shenanigans were too crazy. And rightfully so. It was pretty insane. I wish I could have at least gotten one game in to experience it once just to see it, be like, holy cow, that's insane. But I didn't, and that's okay, because it would have felt real bad, because there wasn't a points change or anything. They were just like, we have, as Tesla carbines, like epic tier weapons that nothing else can touch, because all of a sudden they have devastating wounds that they get to reroll the wound rolls on if they're on an objective marker. That's a lot of potential 6s that could come up and devastate even a vehicle. So then clearly the Tesla was the better choice easily. And now it's like, okay, there's actually a choice here. Do you want something that can deal with larger, harder to hit targets? Well, Gauss blasters may be it. But Teslas can get through lots and lots of firepower because of the amount of shots that potentially will go through. But if you're hitting up against a hard target like a vehicle or something with a higher toughness, then I guess it'd be higher than 9. So once you hit 10, then you have to roll on 6s, because a 5 and 6 on wound is still hard, because it's only, a third of your shots will connect according to the statistics. So I think overall I prefer the Teslas right now. Gauss definitely look way cooler, but the Teslas are the king of the court right now. What do you think of the Immortals at this point in the game? Are we in a good spot with them? Which one do you prefer weapon-wise? Have you checked out Necrons yet? If you haven't and you're watching this video, go look up what a Necron Immortal really looks like. You should have seen the picture to start the video, but Necron Immortals are something amazing. It's like, what if a Necron Warrior wasn't broken? Basically, that's what a Necron Immortal is. I just wish still that they had 2 wounds. Even if I took a little bit of a points increase, 2 wounds would make them so much more interesting as a unit and make them kind of feel different than the Necron Warriors. So, is there some other things we could do with this? Sure. We could throw Cryptothralls on those, but we're not talking about those much anymore, because now they're just really expensive for very little that they give out. They're pretty sad. They really are. They're a sad thing that they didn't change, and they made them basically useless. There's a few little shenanigans, but we can talk about them in another video. I just hope this has been kind of a fun little conversation through Necron Immortals, why they're good, which one should you choose. Different situations require different solutions here, and I think the Immortals are an interesting example of, they have weapons that do 2 vastly different things, whereas ironically right now the Necron Warriors don't. They have weapons that are very similar to one another. I've been Cody from the Keepers of Nerddom. Like, share, and subscribe. I hope you've enjoyed hanging out with us, hanging out with me, talking, and keep the conversation going down in the comments below. Thank you all for hanging out. We'll talk to you later. Bye.